Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of No Questions Left Behind. I'm Sam.
And I'm Stevie.
And we're here to answer all of the questions, or as many of the questions as we can, that we didn't get to earlier this week during our live event. So you can tell I'm taking, well, I don't know, I'm taking Nick's place, or you're taking Nick's place?
I'm taking your place, you're taking Nick's place, who knows?
Nick and Stevie were on the live this week. I was out of town in Las Vegas looking for some exciting new products for you all at the National Hardware Show. But I'm back, so Nick is in some very important meetings today, so you get Stevie and I for No Questions Left Behind. Before we get too far into it, we got two big reminders for you. First off is our 20% off liquid car care sale going on right now. Huge sale on tons of awesome products. If you're stocking up for spring, you must take advantage of this 20% off. Great way to save yourself some money while you're getting restocked on all your liquids, especially gallons. Key code SMLiquid. That's Sam Mary Liquid. Ends 3/25. So just, well, it's a little more than a few days.
Yep.
Almost a week.
You got the weekend to figure out your shopping list and hop on it.
Yeah, so get after it, get on there, take advantage of that 20% off sale. On top of that, we have our new apparel drop that was just released last week. Stevie here is so kindly modeling the limited Hakosuka design with the first generation skyline on there. Pretty awesome design on a black tee, really pops out with the red and white. So that specific design will be available for 2 weeks, so not a lot of time. So if you want to get in on that collector series design, make sure you place your order as soon as possible. The website for that is griotgarage-group6.com. Group 6 is spelled Group, number 6ix.com. So Group 6 with the number 6 replacing the S in 6.
We will also be sending an email within the next couple days announcing that and having a direct link to the website. So if you'd prefer to just sign up for our emails, go ahead and do that and you will see that shortly. Yeah,
that email will go out Friday evening, I believe, so you should see that soon. And you can also access the link through our social media pages, Instagram and Facebook as well. So definitely don't sleep on that limited design. We also have 5 other designs that are considered legacy designs that are limited but will be around for approximately 3 months. So we're planning on doing those for a quarter depending on how sales go. So those will also be somewhat limited until we rotate to the next 5. So if you like any of the designs that are currently live, get on that website, place your orders. Those orders are made to order, so once you place it, your shirt will be made and shipped to you. So it will include a slightly longer lead time than what you're used to if you just place an order off our website. It'll be about 7 to 10 days, depending on when in the week you place your order. So just keep that in mind. But lots of awesome designs. You guys have been asking us for a long time how you can get some of the shirts that we wear on the lives and in our videos. These Group 6 designs are really cool and unique, and a lot of the vehicles, specifically the ones that you'll see in the legacy designs, are very special vehicles to Griot's Garage. So either vehicles that are owned by the Griots or vehicles that we have used heavily for other marketing and branding things, as well as on our air fresheners like that R35 design. So get on there and pick those up while you can. They are all limited, with the Hakosuka being the shortest 2-week window, and then all of the legacy designs being a quarterly drop. So those, a little more time to get those in.
Yep, and then I just want to call out that you have the option of getting each of these designs in a hoodie like you see Sam wearing, or a t-shirt. This specific t-shirt is a men's cut. Ladies, you do have the option of a women's cut. I like the men's because it's just a little bit longer on me, but if you prefer like a normal end t-shirt, you could definitely get the women's cut. So it's really exciting that you have essentially a bunch of different options that you can choose from.
Yeah, and they're available in full range of sizes, so something for everybody there. And then, of course, the hoodies, like Stevie mentioned, these are just a classic, kangaroo pocket hoodie drawstrings and standard hood. And then there'll also be stickers available for all of these designs. So you can get all 3 mediums if you find something that you really love. But definitely take advantage of that while you can. Yeah, if you have trouble finding the link or anything like that, just feel free to drop us a line and we'll get you pointed in the right direction.
Yep. So without further ado, should we get into the questions?
Better get started with some questions.
All right. So first, Alan Friedlander asked, can I use 3-in-1 with a black pad? You absolutely can. Any of the all-in-one products, you really have a world of options to use as far as pads. You could use a black pad if your surface is already nearly perfect and you just want to kind of refine and enhance gloss. If you want a little more cut, maybe to move some light to moderate defects, you could use like an orange pad or even a white foam pad. Or depending on the surface, sometimes you can get away with a microfiber pad just to amplify that cut even more, but it really is going to depend on the surface and you want to do your test section because sometimes that microfiber will leave a haze that you'll want a finishing step for, and in that case, it's not going to be beneficial to use that with an all-in-one.
Definitely. Great answer, Stevie. Benefits of a waffle pad. This was also asked by Alan. In all of our testing, we technically haven't really found any benefits to using a waffle pad over a flat face foam pad. There are various marketing claims purported and things like that, but when it comes down to it, from what we found, it's really just a personal preference decision. If that's something that you've been using and liking it, it's not necessarily any sense in changing it if it's not broken. But in all of our temperature testing and analytical testing that we've done with waffle style versus flat face foam pads, we haven't found any temperature reductions or any notable differences between the two, other than personal preference of using the waffling to help distribute product across the pad or things like that. But no real tangible performance differences between the two in our experience.
Yep. Alan also asked, can I clean the pads during polishing so I can reuse them? Yes and no. So if you're referring to cleaning as far as like an actual thorough clean, no. So if you're, for example, if you're asking if you can use the same pad for your like 4 pads that we recommend per process per vehicle, no, there's no way to really like thoroughly clean it like that during use. So you want to make sure you have enough pads to get around the vehicle, but during use you do want to make sure you're clearing the cells of the foam or fluffing the microfiber with the pad conditioning brush like Sam has there, or with compressed air. You can blow the product out of the pad.
Yeah, I'll give you a real quick demo of pad cleaning with the brush. This is a microfiber pad, which microfiber, it's especially essential that you clean these after each section because the fibers can become matted and they really, that will drastically reduce the cutting power when they become matted down. So you want to make sure you clean them. Same case with foam, just like Stevie just said, in between every section. Really, whenever you pull the orbital off the paint, I recommend cleaning the pads, the brush. Simply turn the orbital on and run your brush from the inside out. Now you can spin it up pretty fast. I just run it back and forth like so. And that's gonna refluff your fibers nicely, as well as clean the pores out of the foam if you're using a foam pad. Helps that pad get consistent results for a longer period of time. You will notice that the pad will maintain its defect removal ability much longer. It's going to help keep it more firm. Lots of benefits to doing that, not only to prolong the life of your pads, but make your paint correction more efficient and more consistent in terms of not wearing a pad out to where you're really losing a lot of the performance towards the end of that pad cycle on that car.
Yeah, wearing your pad out and wearing yourself out because you're chasing defects that you were able to get out fairly easily, and now you have a soft, gunked up pad.
Yeah, a fresh pad or a pad that's being cleaned during use, I would say will remove defects up to twice as fast as a pad that you've been running for a long time. It's full of product, it's soft, it's hot, all of those things. So.
Yeah, and like we touched on yesterday, you might see that you could use one pad and that would be the most cost effective, but it's really not, because as you just mentioned, if you're not cleaning out that pad, it also wears down the pad, and so then you don't get the full lifespan of that pad. Yeah. Whereas if you were say, using our 4 to 6 pads per process per vehicle recommendation, that pad isn't going to get nearly as beat, and so then you can wash it and continue to reuse it for a very long time, multiple uses. Whereas if you're overworking the pad, it's going to break down fairly quickly.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, gosh, when I first started out, I was trying to use fewer pads and quickly realized that I was just shooting myself in the foot because it created a lot of frustration, and that if I kept the same process, say I start the car with a fresh orange foam polishing pad and I'm doing 5 passes and I'm trying to use that pad over the whole car, by the time I'm into the, say, the second quarter of that vehicle, I'm starting to notice, okay, I'm doing these same 5 passes and I'm not getting near the results that I got when I first started. So then you have to start doing more passes, which in turn takes more time. Or if you make the assumption and keep using the same number of passes, you're going to notice that the second half of your job has inferior results compared to the first half. So that was a long-winded answer, but I think that's a very important one. Yeah. Really high value add if you're not currently doing that in your polishing process, to pick up a pad cleaning brush. These are what, $14.99? I think
couldn't tell you off the top
pretty
of my head.
Inexpensive, don't quote me on that price, but inexpensive way to really maximize your performance and results. Does not add a lot of time to the process. Very easy to do, very cheap to do. Yeah, tons of benefits to it, so cannot recommend that enough. If you're not doing it currently, you will see the difference when you start doing that, so strongly encouraged.
Yeah, so I have a question for you, Sam, because Nick and I both answered it last night, but it's kind of fun and interesting. So if you're doing a 2-step process, what's your go-to? Like, what's your go-to for your test section that you think is going to get it perfect for your second step?
For my second step?
Yeah.
Oh, that's easy. I mean, first step's going to be fast correcting cream and microfiber. Second step's almost always going to be perfecting cream on a yellow or an orange pad. I really like the orange foam with perfecting cream. I've gotten some pretty great results in a pretty wide range of paint types with that combo. And yeah, that's almost always my go-to 1-2 punch. If it's crazy soft, I may go into finishing sealant on a black or yellow pad, but that's pretty rare. I think I've only done that on like 4 or 5 cars. The ESO and the Islero being 2 of them, which both had very, very soft paint. So, yeah, that's a good question though.
Yeah. Bevan also asked, if you put too much product on a pad, should you wipe it off or use it on the vehicle over a larger area? I think this is a nuanced question, and maybe I just overthink all of these, but it really depends on when you realize that you've put too much product on the pad. Because if you're starting to apply the product, and like last night I was showing, or I guess Wednesday, I was showing the difference in lines of product, how you don't want it to be a toothpaste commercial where you have that thick like swoop of product. You want to have like a half line essentially where you're moving the bottle while you apply the product. If you realize right off the bat that you've applied that thick like line of product, then you could definitely remedy that pretty easily by ceasing that, moving the product or the bottle around the pad to get the even application that you need, and using the tip of the bottle to rub that initial like glob, if you will, in. But if you say that you applied product to the pad and then you are like, oh, wait, shoot, that's way too much, you can try and wipe it off, but chances are you're gonna see sling. So my recommendation would be, if there's a lot, definitely kind of take a microfiber and try and wipe some of that off, or another pad, you can kind of saturate it. But then I would recommend dabbing the product around the area that you're gonna work, and probably around a larger area than you normally would. That's gonna help remove a little more of that product. And then starting on a very, very low speed, because if there is a chance of sling, you can mitigate that by starting on a low speed. It's not to say that you won't get sling, but there's a lower chance if you start on that low speed, spread the product over a larger work area, and then bump it up to the high speed and just be prepared in case you do get some sling. We have a detailing apron if you're new to polishing and you don't want to trash any of the clothes that you're wearing. That could be a good alternative to help protect your clothing. But
yeah, or if you're like me and you're just bad at taking the time to go change, having an apron hanging up definitely helps.
Yeah. don't want to go through the drive-through with a white sling of product across your chest.
Yeah.
But yeah, those will help mitigate the chances of sling, but once you've over-applied product, if you've really, really overdone it, there's no way to 100% ensure that you're not slinging product, except for taking that pad off, setting it to the side to be washed, and using a new pad.
Yeah, it'll add a lot of weight to the pads if you're overloading them, and it's hard to get that out, like Stevie said, once it's in there. So if you notice before it's soaked into the foam, just wipe it right off. Make sure you don't mix that towel into your wipe-off towels because you'll get smears all over the paint. But wipe it off with a towel, toss that towel out of the way, and then keep working. Let's see here. Bevan McCain asked, would you ever use a pad with no polish on it to clean up residual hazing on the surface of the vehicle? No. Using a dry pad is likely going to lead to more hazing, even with a soft foam. These products are all designed to help lubricate the surface, which will prevent haze and improve the overall user experience and results. So never use a dry pad on paint.
Yep. Binford6100 asked, is the Boss Ceramic All-in-One still on the way soon? It absolutely is.
Yes. We're working through just getting a little bit more performance out of that one for you guys. So as you know, we like to push things, strive for perfection. And sometimes that leads to shifting launch dates to make sure that we're getting the product exactly right and not just rushing something out. A tiny bit behind on that one, but it's looking like that one will be out in May. So coming soon.
Yep. Brian Pizzuti asked, I feel like I just made that up, sorry. That's probably way wrong pronunciation. You speak about temperature. How do we know what is too hot? So after you do your polishing sections, your 3 to 4 passes, definitely don't overwork the panel because that's when you really get into the territory of potentially overheating. But after your 3 to 4 passes, or maybe if you've focused on a random isolated defect a little bit, really feel the surface with the back of your hand and feel how hot it feels physically. If it feels hot to the touch, leave it. Let it cool down. Don't overwork that section. If it feels like lightly warm, like barely warm, maybe lukewarm, then you could probably do a couple more passes if needed, but best case scenario is going to be to let that panel cool back down before you hit it again, just to make sure that you're not overheating.
Yeah, I'd say, anything that's too hot where you can't hold your hand on it for a couple seconds. I think the hottest I got paint, which this was doing some torture testing, kind of just experimenting, seeing how hot we could get stuff before polishes started to seize up and pads started to melt and that whole thing. I think it was 320 degrees. Was the
not
hottest.
Recommended though.
No, definitely not recommended. But that was like the pad had melted to the backing plate. The product was completely seized on the surface, and we were probably very, very, very close to burning that paint.
Yeah, and it really does depend on the paint system too. So you always want to err on the side of caution. So if it starts to feel hot, like he's saying, you can't hold your hand to it for more than a few seconds, definitely back off. Yeah,
do not do that at home. I was just giving a frame of reference for how hot paint can get under an orbital, random orbital polisher. The only way you're going to ever get to that level of heat is if you're sitting in one spot, not moving the polisher over the surface and putting a ton of pressure behind it at speed 6, which you should really never do. You always want to make sure you keep that polisher moving. Even if you're focusing on a spot, move slowly back and forth over that spot, with short durations of staying on it, so that you're not generating too much heat.
Yeah,
it's a tough one.
Brian also asked, does heat increase with more pressure or less? You're definitely going to get more heat with more pressure, so that's another thing to keep into consideration and be mindful of while you're polishing.
Yep. Brother854 asked a good one. How do you do panels close to PPF or paint protection film? If it's standard PPF and it's not self-healing, in a lot of situations you can polish right over it. You just want to ensure that you're not using something that's too aggressive that might haze the PPF. Haze can sometimes be finicky to remove from paint protection film, so I normally won't go over paint protection film with anything more aggressive than Boss Correcting Cream. unless, you know, the film's in condition where you're like, you know, it's not going to get any worse, you know, so I'm going to take some attempts at saving it. And if I can't, you know, it's going to come off or something like that. In that case, of course, you can, you know, go a little more aggressive and attempt to save it. But edges are an area to watch out for. I always make sure I've spread product out over a large surface before I transition over a paint protection film edge, or just stay away from the edge altogether. That's to make sure you don't get, you know, product residue stuck in that edge that's going to be difficult to remove. Or if the edges have started peeling at all, which can be common on older PPF, stay away from them altogether so you don't make that peel even worse.
Yep. I wish I would have seen this question last night, but this is from Cameron Huntsucker. If you're leaving clouds or trails, how do you know if the defect is gone? Can you put something wet on it to kind of see through? I wish I would have seen this last night because I could have tried to show you on the camera, because there was one deeper scratch on the panel we tested the polishing process on that was just too deep to come out with that process. Maybe I could have focused on it a little bit more and got it out, but you could definitely see it. Typically, the clouds and trails that you're leaving behind, even especially on this paint, which was really soft and showed everything way more than I've ever seen really on a bunch of other surfaces, you're still going to see that scratch through because the hazing or the micro marring is so fine that those scratches that are deep enough that they're lingering beyond that first initial cut step, typically you're still going to see those as swirl marks or scratches through that haze.
Sometimes they'll even stand out more, depending, I think, on the color of the finish. But make sure you have a really good set of lights. I mean, that's going to be essential with any color. Really, you know, from doing your initial evaluation to finding those left behind defects as you're working. Again, can't stress that enough. On top of, you know, having a way to clean your pads mid-use, having a good set of lights is absolutely essential. I would not do a paint correction without a good set of lights. So, you know, at least one handheld at the very least, but I like having a handheld and a light or 2 or 3 on a tripod behind me that I can move around as I go. That gives me a constant, you know, enhanced visual of what's going on. And then I'll pull out the handheld light when I really need to get, you know, fine up on something, or I'm moving around in the light trying to find, you know, make sure nothing's left behind, that sort of thing. But very important. Specifically for situations like that. And then making sure all the residue's off, obviously. That one, hard to tell if he's talking about like cloud or trails from residue, assuming he's talking about haze, but always want to make sure all that residue's off first, of course.
Yep.
Cat Richard Bojangles.
I saw this last night. Yeah, I saw this last night, and I was like, did Julie change this to make the name PC?
No, he did. Remember, because we were giving him a hard time about like not being able to say his name, or just calling him Cat Bojangles or whatever. But any tips for white paint? I struggle really hard, not only keeping track of working area, but being able to see results after wiping down. I feel like I can't get it right. Very common. You're not alone there, Cat Richard Bojangles. We've all been there on white paint. I'll go back to my last answer, a good set of lights. For white paint or light colors, white, silver, tan, things like that, having a handheld and the lights behind you, I think, are essential, because a lot of what I will do on white paint, Stevie and I actually just did a full paint correction and coating on a silver Range Rover, and I'll, you know, have that light set up behind me and then have my handheld. And if you were walking by and you didn't know what I was doing, you would think I was absolutely crazy, because that's when you're, you know, shifting the light back and forth across the panel, trying to make sure that you've removed everything from defects to haze. But really, having a stationary light behind you where you can move to get that light's perspective on the finish to change, and then also having a handheld light is going to allow you to manipulate both of those you know, light broadcasts to pick up defects that are left behind, or residue. That totally escaped me. Yeah. We actually had a situation on that Range Rover where I had done a door and I was moving on to the next door, and Stevie came by to check my work. And I don't think you were actually checking my work. She was just walking by and looked at the paint from an angle that I hadn't yet, and I was like, oh, there's still a couple straight line scratches left behind from some deeper defects that looked like, you know, a dog had jumped on the door at some point.
Yeah, and that's a perfect example of what we're referring to, and kind of what we talked about last night with catching it at the right angle. When you're looking at it straight on or even kind of at an angle with the light right there, it's reflecting a lot of that at you, and so it's tricky to see those defects. Whereas I was looking from the back, from the back corner of the vehicle, I was looking down the side, and so the light was kind of coming at an angle, and I was just like, oh, there's one right there.
Well, yeah, you were looking at it from like 160 degrees or something like that, and just was just the right angle where the light coming from the other direction highlighted that left behind defect, and I went back over it and got it out. So
yeah, so as far as seeing like what sections you've already done and kind of keeping track of those, making sure that if it's beneficial, you could work with like body panels. So if you're working with like a curve on a door, you could work the longer top section, and then, you know, this way halfway, and then this halfway, and then the lower like indent if there's a like kind of tilt in at the bottom of the panel. Kind of working with the body lines to delineate your sections. Or like I was saying, if there's like spots where your tape on the trim overlapped, you could use that as a landmark. Really, you can get creative with it, whatever works for you.
Yeah, and I've done it before, you know, especially on lighter colored vehicles, where when you're spreading product out and you start your pass, and outline your working section, and that, I think, mentally helps keep you in some guardrails of, okay, I'm just going to work in this area, and then I'm going to move to the next area, so that when you're wiping off, you have that same kind of mental image of, all right, I just did this outlined section, I'm going to wipe that off and move on. And then I think with wipe off too, you see a lot of people that rush through the wipe off, which can cause you to miss stuff, because if you don't have all that residue off, you're not going to see things. So really making sure that you're being diligent when you're wiping off. Do an initial buff, flip the towel to a clean side, buff again, every single panel. You know, don't do it haphazardly to where you're going to be leaving a lot behind that you might miss, you know, when you're coming back, especially on a lighter vehicle. So be religious about your wipe-off technique. Yep.
Dennis C. asked, what's the best type of lighting to use in my garage space where I polish? Bright white LED lights are going to be the best. The closer to daylight, the better. The yellow tint tends to hide a little bit more, so the whiter you can get, the better. And then making sure that it is a bright enough LED light that's directly focused on the surface. If you have a widespread, say like garage lighting from the ceiling, that might not be quite as direct as you need. So really just assess and kind of figure out.
Yeah. Some of it depends on what type of, you know, what extent of work you're doing too. As like wet sanding, having straight, you know, beam lights will allow you to see orange peel and the changes in that more, because you have that, you know, that straight line of light broadcast across a larger surface, so you can see when it goes from orange peel when it's all muddled to that nice crisp clean reflection. And then I would say that circular beam lights are going to be better for paint correction in my experience. They normally highlight swirls and haze a little bit more than a beam or a bank of lights will. So having, you know, like our cordless LED shop lights, when I talk about, you know, circle or focus, you know, more of a spotlight, be talking about like the pen light end of the swirl finder light, and then talking about a beam or a straight line would be more this this setting here. So really going to depend a little bit on what you're doing as well.
Yep.
But lots of options out there, you know, ranging from pretty inexpensive to, you know, thousands of dollars if you want to get into the really high-end stuff. I would say for paint correction, you don't really need like color matching capability. That's going to be more for refinishing, where you're, you know, blending paints or, you know, doing transitions, things like that, where you need to match colors. But I think right around like 5,000 K is a pretty good color temperature for standard garage lighting that you're going to be using in a space where you detail.
Yep. Elliot Carson asked, does Griot have any plans for a forced rotation buffer? We currently offer our rotary, which you have there on that cart, which is forced gear-driven rotation. Also, our hybrid micro has the rotary option. As far as a larger platform tool, I see another question on here asking about that. We'll see.
Us, one of our favorite local customers, Dirty Harry Auto Detail. Love this question. He said, if you're a baller on a budget, is it better to have a variety of compounds or a variety of pads? Would having a microfiber and orange pad with 4 compounds be better than having all the pads and, say, correcting cream? That is a tough question to answer, but I'm going to say my preference personally would be to have all of the pads, and I'm going to go a little bit above and go with 2 creams instead of just 1. Whoops, I picked up the wrong 2 there. But I would go with fast and perfecting and then the full range of pads. I think that can get you through a lot of different situations because of the adaptability with all the different pads. So you can really detune perfecting cream or tune it up a little bit. For a one-step scenario, or again, you can detune this for a one-step scenario to where you get really nice crispy finish depending on the paint. So
yeah.
that would be my preference. All the pads and
yeah.
two creams or 2 liquids.
I 100% agree with that. And then if you wanted to make sure that you were 100% able to tackle anything that came your way, having like an all-in-one to finish that with. Because as we saw last night, the perfecting cream was a little too much for this paint. And mind you, this paint is fairly unique, or rare, I guess, as far as the results.
Very soft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And typically you're not going to come across that fairly often. But then if you have that all-in-one, you have that option if you need it.
Yeah, and a lot of times on really high-end paint jobs, like what's on the Lincoln and some of the other vehicles that we have around here, they're going to be on the soft side because soft clears are much easier for the painter to sand down to that perfect flat perfection. So you'll tend to see a slightly softer finish on higher end paint jobs. But yeah, really going to depend, but I think that's a great answer. Finishing sealant is a great secret weapon to have in your back pocket for those situations where you're working on something that's very finicky or very soft.
Yep.
Oh, great question, though. I like that.
Yep.
Why does Griots only have 1 wool pad? Mainly because we don't have a full rotary offering yet. When you get into the extensive options of wool pads, most of them are for rotary applications, so that's the main reason there.
Yep. Enthusiast asked, are there any tips for the edges of panels, making sure that you're not overdoing it? As paint cures or settles, it moves away from the edges of panels typically, so you want to avoid high edges. And so making sure that you're working the flat of the panel predominantly, and then a couple quick passes where you cover the edge as opposed to really focusing on that edge. And even if you have a deep scratch that goes over an edge, kind of like the panel that you were working on my door on our last Polishing Basics live, you don't want to focus on that high edge, even if the scratch comes over it. You want to kind of work it from both ways and then kind of hit that delicately and get it the best that you can.
Yeah, we call it heel-toe polishing, so it can be a little hard to explain without seeing it, but using the toe being the front edge of your backing plate when you're polishing to get down over an edge or an angle, and then or down into a valley, and then again using the toe or the rear edge of the backing plate to get the lower edge of an opposing side of a valley, and really adapt that pad face to that surface, keeping it as flat as possible. Gets more into a technique that is going to need to be practiced, not something that you're going to pick up overnight, but is pretty easy and intuitive once you get used to it on a couple different vehicles.
Yep. Enthusiast also asked what speeds are you using for both steps. There was also another question about whether you're using different speeds for your initial cutting step and your final polishing step. The general recommendation for both of those is going to be starting on a low speed, like 2, maybe 3, and spreading your product, and then bumping up to speed 4 or 5 to do your actual polishing steps. Obviously, if you have a heavy defect and you kind of need that little extra oomph, you can go up to 6, but typically you're going to stick on the same speeds for both processes and just do your steady, moderate arm speed 3 to 4 passes.
Yeah, and a lot of times for finishing, you can slow down if you want to.
Yeah.
Depends on what you're working on. In my experience, softer finishes are going to allow you to slow down more, whereas I've slowed down before on hard finishes and realized, okay, I got to speed it back up because that's not quite cutting the haze out as fast as I want it to, things like that. But, if you can slow down, it's definitely easier on you, easier on the paint, easier on the pads. So if you can, give it a shot, do a little test section at that slower speed for your finishing step and see how the paint responds. And then if it responds well, you can chill out a little more and, hear whatever you got playing through your headphones a little better and that sort of thing. So a little more relaxing. Let's see.
John Krupe had an interesting question. I have a brand new Benz. I plan to paint correct and ceramic coat, seeing a lot of orange peel. Any recommendations to clean it up without sanding?
No.
No, unfortunately.
Yeah, no way that you can get orange peel out without sanding. So if you were to try to polish orange peel out, you would get the paint so hot that you're going to run the risk of causing all sorts of other problems. And really, I mean, on a new Benz, orange peel is going to be totally normal. Even very high-end vehicles, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Porsches, you name it, a factory finish is pretty much always going to have some level of orange peel. So it's just what you get with a factory finish. If you want to pay thousands of dollars to have a professional wet sand all of that out, that is totally up to you. Getting that nice, perfectly flat finish is amazing. But I would base it on what you're using that car for. If you're going to be daily driving that Mercedes, I would not recommend trying to get all the orange peel out because you're going to thin that paint out so much that you're almost guaranteed to have issues down the road. If you're, not dailying it and it's your show vehicle, then yeah, sure. If you want to spend that kind of money on it, absolutely get that perfect finish. But really depends on what you're using it for.
Yep. Cole Kirk asked a question, and I wanted to head this off because we did kind of talk about it a little bit last night, but just to wrap it in a neat little package and give you a concise answer. He's saying that he has 1-inch thick metal trim on his vehicle, and he's wanting to know if there's a best recommended process that's maybe not hand polishing. And we kind of talked about this last night, but you could use like the 1-inch extension on the G8, for example. I find that especially if it's metal and it's not coated, if it's raw metal surface, that a 1-inch either orange or white foam pad with ceramic metal polish by hand works phenomenal on most surfaces. It really does depend on how badly trashed it is. If you've got some real nasty water spots, you might want that extra umph from the orbital. And also keep in mind if there's any deep scratches, you're not getting those out with polish. But yeah, I find that I have great results by hand, but you could bump it up with the G8 1-inch extension, or even depending on the surface, the rotary 1-inch. I would recommend keeping that on a low speed, and especially on like softer metal surfaces, just be aware that you could be causing some hazing, so you want to do a test section.
Yeah, he mentioned that some of his trim is around 1/2 inch wide too. So in those scenarios, unless it's an area where you can hang the 1-inch pad off like the top edge of the trim and still machine polish it that way, you may have to look for an even finer way to machine polish. I know I've seen folks use like Dremel tools. Of course, that's going to be a more rotary application, but depending on the type of polishing head that you're using, you may be able to find one soft enough where even the rotary application isn't going to cause any sort of like hologramming or weird finish that you would then have to come back over with hand. So there are options out there, but yeah, right now, unfortunately, the smallest size we have for the machine is the 1-inch. Otherwise, anything smaller than that, you're wrapping a towel around your finger or using a swab and getting very detailed with it.
Yep.
But Neil White asked, what machine would you prefer to use on headlights, GR3 or G13? G13, 100%. I would, if you're sanding the headlights, I would recommend the G8, or the micro with the 5mm counterbalance is going to be even better. For sanding, you want a smaller throw. You do not want a long throw for sanding, or it will actually, amplify your sand scratches. So yeah, make sure you keep that in mind. So if I was sanding the headlights, I would go a G8 or micro with the 5mm counterbalance. If you're just talking about polishing, G13 is a great option there. So.
Yep. So this question is, I'm just gonna set it up and let you knock it out of the park because I know you're gonna love this one. Polly Walnuts asked, equipment question, G9 6 or 5-inch pads?
I like your handle, Polly Walnuts. It's a good one. 5-inch. I'm very biased to the 5-inch plate. I think people around here get irritated with me sometimes because I really only like to use 5-inch pads, and I convert pretty much every tool to a 5-inch plate.
Yeah, because we have literally one 6-inch plate G9 back here, and then I catch him trying to unscrew the backing plate, and I'm like, what are you doing? There's a 5-inch one right here.
Yeah, I like the 5-inch size. I think a lot of it's just based on experience, especially with modern cars. You get a lot of tricky areas, and the 5-inch just prevents you from having to swap back and forth between tools quite as much. And if you're upgrading a tool that comes with a 6-inch plate to the 5-inch, you're going to slightly amplify your defect removal because you're transferring that same amount of energy over a smaller surface area. So if you're thinking in terms of PSI or pressure that you're applying to the surface, you're actually going to get more pressure when you're applying the same amount of pressure. You're going to get more pressure to the surface with that smaller backing plate. So a little more effective too, but also versatility.
Yep.
Not saying if you like the 6-inch, by all means, don't fix it if it ain't broken.
Teach their own.
Yep.
Polly Walnuts asked, will paint gauge work on fiberglass and carbon fiber?
No.
Ours will not. As Nick mentioned last night, you can find some that will, but they're gonna be pretty spendy.
Yeah, you're gonna get into the $1,000 plus range if you're looking for a gauge that can take readings on synthetic surfaces like fiberglass and carbon fiber.
Yep. Rich Smith asked, will Griots put out a 25mm polisher?
I doubt
Maybe,
it.
but yeah, we don't have any direct plans to.
Yeah, no plans. I haven't used one of those yet, but my gut instinct tells me that's getting into a size throw that might fight you more than it's going to benefit you in a lot of ways. So, yeah, won't knock it till I try it, but we don't have any plans to develop one.
Yep.
Let's see. Original owner of a 1981 black metallic 911 SC. Very nice. Original owner too. That's valuable. How do I polish after touching up a paint chip? Great question. So, ideal process for this is a little long-winded, and I don't want to totally hijack the end of this, but best case after touch-up paint is to do a light wet sand over that touch-up spot with like a 3000 grit to help blend it into the paint around it, and then come in and polish that out. So usually at that point you're going to be fast correcting cream and microfiber, and then a second step with a lighter polish and a foam pad. Depending on the paint, but that's best case scenario. If you don't want to do the sanding step, really as soon as that touch-up paint is cured, you can polish over it. So not a big deal there. I would use a little bit of caution. Don't use a ton of pressure on areas that you've touched up, so that you don't pull that touch-up paint back off, because typically it's not going to be quite as resilient as the clear coat around it. But just a few things to keep in mind there.
Yep. Okay, so we have a slew of questions now from Sammy D. We haven't picked a winner yet, and we need to do that.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I don't think I've seen Sammy D in here before either.
Yeah, I haven't either. Unless it's Samuel Donko and he just changed his name, and in that case, we're gonna have a problem.
That would be funny. I will have to do some sleuthing to make sure.
There are a lot of questions here. So what's your best hydrophobic wax? It's going to be any of our ceramic protectants. I would say, you would think,
ceramic liquid wax.
Best, yeah, ceramic liquid wax is going to be the best because it has that extended durability over any of the others. But they're all going to provide amazing repellency and hydrophobic effect.
Yeah.
He also asked, can you polish a repainted car? And you absolutely can. In fact, some vehicles will
100%.
have like repainted panels where the rest is original factory paint. Absolutely, just keep in mind that repaint might react differently than OEM paint, and so you want to make sure you're doing your test section. Even if you've already done a test section on the OEM and then you're moving to a repainted panel, just test that section, make sure it's performing as you like on that repainted panel before you do the entire surface.
I shouldn't assume this is a he. It's run into plenty of Sams or Samanthas that are females, but Sammy also asked a couple questions that are impossible to answer with a single answer. But how many times can you polish a car? That tons of variables that go into that. Not only has it been polished before? How old is it? Has it been repainted? Are there any refinished areas?
Even different manufacturers will apply different levels of paint and thicknesses.
What type of products are you using? So there's not really a way to answer that with a number. I would say most vehicles you can polish a lot, more than you would think before you're getting into causing problems. Sammy also asked, how do you know when paint's getting too thin? That can be tough to tell sometimes without a paint gauge. That's one of the best, justifications to pick one of those up, is it takes the guesswork out of it and gives you an actual number of, okay, I'm here. I know this process is removing X amount of clear, and I've got this much on this section, so I'm going to change my process for that, or whatever it be. But a couple signs. A solvent pop kind of appearance where you get this looks like a speckling almost in the paint.
Kind of like the pores on your skin. If you have
that's a great way to describe it. Yeah, it looks like it's getting porous. That can be a sign that you're about to burn through. Heat is another sign. If the paint's very hot, there's a good chance you're thinning it out a fair amount.
You may see a shift in color too.
That's you took the words right out of my mouth, Stevie. But color, a color shift, especially on a single stage paint, like on a black single stage, oftentimes they have like a brown primer underneath, and you'll see the black become less and less black as you work through that. So obviously that means you want to stop what you're doing altogether. Other than that though, it's a bit of a guessing game. So that's where the paint gauge comes in. Mm-hmm. Sammy also asked, how many microns of paint does fast correcting cream pad and fast correcting cream remove? Again, impossible to answer that with a direct number because of all the variables. Orbital throw, orbital speed, how much time you're on the panel, how many passes you're doing.
How much pressure.
It's just too many variables to give a straight answer there. Can I also apply wax by DA polisher after a two-step? Yes, you can, absolutely. Next answer kind of leads into the second part, or next question leads into the second part of my answer for that first question. Does applying the wax with a long throw remove paint?
A wax, no. But if you're using something like we were using last night, in that case you are, because you're using an all-in-one, like a protection and a polish in one. But we also don't recommend applying most waxes with our long throw tools, because the heat generated from that long throw is going to essentially prematurely cure the wax. It's not going to be able to fully bond to the paint, and it's going to impact your durability that you're going to see. So we don't recommend applying any waxes other than the finishing sealant that we offer with a long throw tool.
Yeah.
But if you were applying a wax with a long throw, you wouldn't be removing defects. You wouldn't be affecting the surface in any way. Yeah,
it's just that, you can get that buffer trails from the longer throw causing it to set up too fast.
So all of those questions are why you were selected as a winner. If we find out you're Samuel Donko and you're tricking us, you're going to be in big trouble. But go ahead and email your address to winners@griotsgarage.com.
Yes, we'll hook you up. Sung and Esther also had a few good questions. First time, is it bad to clay bar, mitt, and seal with one of the spray-on sealants? We currently don't have any paint correction equipment. I heard it's preferred to clay bar and then paint correct and polish. I I'd say it depends on the finish a lot of times and how you're clay barring or decontaminating. If you're using like traditional paint cleaning clay to do the decon process, a lot of times that's going to be mild enough where it's not going to mar the finish or create any defects so that you could go directly into a wax. With some of the more aggressive defect removal methods, you might create some marring, thus you would want to do paint correction afterwards to remove that. But it's also going to depend on the condition of the paint prior to starting. But if you don't have any paint correction equipment, then you're already in the space of, okay, I'm not going to do that step. So I would recommend standard paint cleaning clay to ensure you don't cause any marring in the finish, and then put that straight protection on after.
Yeah, so the way that I read this question, which maybe we can answer this too, just so we make sure we cover the base, but I read this question as if you could use like a spray-on sealant as a lubricant with a clay. And if that's the way that it's being asked, then it really does depend, again, on the type of clay that you're using. With a synthetic clay, you could use something like rinseless wash and wax or ceramic speed shine to get protection while you're lubricating. So there you go.
Yeah, that's
whatever
good.
You were asking, there's your answer.
Good consideration. Sung and Esther always asks, should you always decontaminate with clay bar if you don't have any paint correction equipment? Like, can we seal with spray-on stuff? That one, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that falls
exactly
along
how
the
to
same
answer that.
lines.
But yeah, I think we covered that in the last question.
They also asked, I remember there used to be in-store classes. Do you know when they will start that back up again, especially for paint correction? So we actually do offer car care school completely free of charge. You schedule that with our store. So if you give them a call and ask about a car care school appointment, they'll be able to get you on the schedule. And then you bring your vehicle in, or a vehicle, and they'll do a test section and show you really whatever you want to learn about. So if you're curious about a specific defect on your vehicle, they could cover how to address that. If you're curious about using an orbital in general, they could definitely cover that. It's really tailored to what you want to learn. So you call, let us know what you want to learn, and we'll get you on the schedule.
Yeah, keep in mind it is a demo. We're not going to be doing like full processes on any area of your vehicle. Just as a disclaimer, every once in a while we'll get that customer that's like, oh, what about this stain on my interior? And what about this stain on my interior? And what about this stain? And this other one? And then this one in the back seat? And then this? And it's like, okay, we're not detailing your whole interior. Just demos. But as long as you're okay with that, we'll get you taken care of.
Yep.
If there are paint chips on the car's paint, will correcting polishing affect those small chipped areas? Typically not. As long as, what am I trying to say here? As long as you don't have a ton of product on your pad and you've already spread it over an area, I'd say that's the biggest issue you'll run into going over chip sections, is if you have a lot of product on your pad, that will squeeze off into those chips and may take some extra wiping to get that surface clean and residue free. But other than that, there's really not a lot of risk. As long as there's no like actively peeling paint to where if you polish over it, it might cause it to peel more. If it's just a rock chip, but what's around it is healthy paint, you're totally good to just polish right over those areas. And then just make sure you give them the attention when you're wiping off so that you aren't leaving residue in those rock chips. Cypher asks, is there a big difference between your complete compound and correcting cream? And in which situation would you go with one over the other? There is a pretty big difference between those, and that's really in the lubricity and the working time of the product, as well as the abrasive. So fast correcting cream is going to be your F1 car as far as heavy defect removal goes, and correcting cream is going to be more your sport model of a production car. This is going to get the job done a lot faster, a lot more efficiently, in an easier to use fashion. That's not saying complete compound is difficult to use, but it doesn't have quite as long of a working cycle or buffing time, so it'll tend to dry up a little more, especially if you're using it on a long throw. Fast correcting cream is developed for long throw applications, so if you're using a long throw tool, you really want to get into the boss creams and not necessarily use complete compound. Complete compound is more for standard DA application and then hand application as well.
Yeah, we talked a little bit last night about like particle size. Complete compound does have a slightly larger particle abrasive, so it will give you a little more bite and cut if you're using it for hand application. But like Sam said, it's great for hand and standard throw orbital. If you're using a long throw, definitely move to the Boss creams.
Yeah, fast corrected cream will also finish down better, so it provides a nicer end result finish. Another strong differentiator there. Team Ramey asked, when performing a two-step paint correction, what is the correct way to address around pinstriping? If that pinstriping is painted on and then cleared over, you would treat it just like the rest of the paint. If the pinstriping is on top of the clear coat, which is very common, you're just going to want to take caution around those pinstriped areas. A lot of times I will still go over them, but with very little to no pressure, I'll do more of like a float pass over those sections so that I'm not thinning out or polishing off that pinstriping. But as long as the pinstriping is in good shape, you're okay to polish over it. Just make sure you remove any pressure when you're doing so. If the pinstriping is starting to get thin, you may want to stay away from it completely so that you don't polish through it. And then let's see, what's the correct cream consistency of the Boss products to ensure the best finish? Consistency, I mean, they should all be viscosity that's not too difficult to squeeze out of the bottle and get onto a pad, but not so thin that it runs out of the bottle onto the pad and causes sling and things like that. So I was trying to think of like a kitchen comparison. I'd say they probably should be a little thicker than ketchup, but like not quite as thick as mayonnaise.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard comparing them to condiments,
although
but I'm trying to think of something that everybody's familiar with.
Yeah, I've never squeezed mayonnaise out of a squirt bottle, so I'm not sure what the consistency would look like.
Never use like the little.
I honestly don't eat mayonnaise.
Neither do I. I'm a mustard fan. No mayo on my burgers or sandwiches.
Matt's having a conniption behind the camera.
Yeah, mayo's gross. But I have to put it on all my kids' stuff, so. Yeah. Oh man, but yeah, that's a tough question to answer clearly. But yeah, I don't think in most cases, I think that's a pretty good guardrail. Shouldn't be any thinner than ketchup, shouldn't be really any thicker than mayo. Does that seem accurate, Matt, since Stevie doesn't have much mayo experience? All right, we got a thumbs up from Matt. All right, well, you guys got us to go a little overtime. We were so close to the end of those questions that we just finished the job and answered all of them. So I think that was the first time we answered every question on our sheet, even if we went 10 minutes over our scheduled time, but that's okay. Do it just for our customers.
Sam's just sad because he missed out the actual live event. He's trying to make up for it.
True. I do enjoy them. It was a bummer not being here. But make sure you subscribe if you aren't already. Hit the notification bell. Give us a like, thumbs up. Those all help us out tremendously. So please, 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 if you're not already subscribed, get down there and do so. Hit that notification so that you don't miss out on our next live event, which I think we have the scheduled date for that, don't we, Matt? 23rd. April 23rd. And that will be on all things paint protection. So pretty excited about that one. And then we will also have a no questions left behind immediately after that. So make sure you tune into that to get even more knowledge and info.
Yep.
Don't miss the sale, 20% off liquid car care up. I'm pointing to the wrong corner. It's down there, not up there. Down there, SM Liquid for that 20% off. Don't miss out on that. And then pick up yourself some sweet apparel while you're at it. If you're spending lots of money on liquids, might as well throw an extra, $30 on there for a sweet t-shirt to do all of your spring detailing.
We're saving you money on your products so you can look stylish too.
Yeah, and limited designs. So, the collector series design that Stevie has on will only be available for 2 weeks. So pretty limited. Make sure you get one of those while you can. Thank you all for watching.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and if you've seen previous lives and you were because we get comments all the time. They're like, oh, where'd you get that shirt? Where'd you get that shirt? Just remember that they will be cycling through. So even if you don't love any of the designs now, or you love those, but you want some other ones too, keep your eyes out because those are going to cycle through.
Yeah, and that website is Griot's Garage Group 6 with the number 6. So GROUP number 6IX. So the number 6 replaces the S in 6. Don't forget that part. So Griot's Garage Group6.com for all those t-shirts, sweatshirts, and stickers. Make sure you get in there, get some merch. And yeah, tell us what you got for the next live event. We want to hear what you guys picked up. So pretty sweet stuff in there. Make sure you take advantage of it. But that's all the talking for today. So you guys tune in next time and have fun in your garage.
Have fun in your garage.